The year was 2347, and humanity had finally earned its place among the stars. After 200 years of slow expansion, human colonies stretched across 17 star systems. Jump gates connected these worlds like invisible threads, making travel between stars as normal as crossing an ocean had once been on Earth. Admiral Daniel Carter stood alone on the observation deck of the Earth Defense Station horizon. He watched the blue and green marble of Earth rotate slowly beneath him. The old soldier was 62 years old now. His hair had turned completely silver, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. Those eyes had seen many things over the decades. They had watched the Galactic Council's representatives come and go, always looking down at humans like adults looking at children who had wandered into a room where they did not belong. The Galactic Council was made up of 12 ancient species. These beings had mastered space travel thousands of years before humans had even discovered fire. The Vorath were creatures made of living crystal, cold and logical in everything they did. The Mendari were insect-like beings who spoke through chemical signals instead of words. The Talishi were ancient reptiles who claimed their ancestors had planted the seeds of life across the entire galaxy. Together, these species and others like them controlled everything in known space through treaties, trade deals, and threats that were never spoken aloud, but always understood. Humanity had been given observer status 30 years ago. It was supposed to be temporary, a trial period, to see if humans could behave properly among civilized species. But the trial never seemed to end. Humans could trade with other species. They could travel through council space. They could exist. But they could never vote. They could never speak in the great chambers where decisions were made. They had no voice in matters that decided their own future. Commander Lisa Morgan walked onto the observation deck. Her boots made sharp clicking sounds against the polished floor. She was young for her rank, only 40 years old. Her red-brown hair was pulled back tightly, and she had a reputation for saying exactly what she thought, regardless of who was listening. "Admiral, we have received another message from the Council," she said. She handed him a thin data tablet. "They are demanding that we remove our colony ships from the Kepler 442 system." Carter read the message and felt his jaw tighten with anger. The words glowed on the screen before him. The Kepler 442 system has been designated as a sacred zone. Humanity is ordered to remove all settlements within 6 Earth months. Failure to obey will result in corrective action. "Sacred zone," Carter said quietly. "We have had people living there for 15 years. More than 200,000 human beings have built their lives on those worlds." Morgan nodded grimly. "The Talishi say their ancestors used that system as a burial ground 10 million years ago. Strange that they only remembered this after we discovered valuable minerals there." The Admiral set down the tablet, turned back to the viewport, and looked at Earth hanging in the darkness. The planet looked so beautiful from up here, so fragile. It reminded him of everything humanity had fought so hard to protect. "Send a message to the Council," he said. His voice was quiet but firm. "Tell them we will not leave. Those worlds belong to humans now. They were built with human hands and human sweat. We do not abandon our own." Morgan did not move. "Sir, no species has ever defied the Council before. The last ones who tried were the Corvani. The Council destroyed them completely. Their home planet is still nothing but radioactive dust." "I know the history, Commander." Carter kept his eyes on Earth. "But we are not the Corvani. Humanity has spent 300 years fighting itself. We have survived plagues that killed billions. We have survived nuclear wars that burned our cities to ash. We've watched our civilization collapse and then rebuilt it from nothing. We have crawled back from the edge of extinction again and again. If the Council wants to fight us, they will find that we are much harder to kill than they think." The message was sent within the hour. Council's response came 3 days later. But it was not a message. It was an action. The Talishi war fleet arrived in the Kepler 442 system without any warning. 200 warships came out of jump space like a swarm of silver insects. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built. They surrounded the colony worlds and began firing before anyone could even send a distress call. The bombardment lasted for 6 hours. Plasma fire rained down from the sky like burning rain. Shelters that families had built to protect themselves. meant nothing against weapons designed to crack open planets. Defense satellites captured footage before they were destroyed. The images showed children running through streets as buildings exploded around them. They showed parents trying to shield their babies with their own bodies. They showed ordinary people dying for no reason, except that they had chosen to build homes in a place where the council decided they should not live. By the time the distress signals finally reached Earth, 173,000 colonists were dead. The news hit humanity like a physical blow. Every colony, every space station, every ship in the fleet received the footage within hours. People watched in horror as the images played on screens across human space. They saw the faces of the dead. They heard the final screams recorded by communication systems before they went silent. They witnessed the murder of innocent people who had done nothing wrong. Admiral Carter watched the footage alone in his quarters. His hands shook as the images played. He had known many of those colonists personally. He had attended weddings in the colony cities. He had held babies at naming ceremonies. He had promised those people that Earth would protect them. He had failed them. But as the grief washed through him, something else began to grow. It started as a small flame in his chest, but it quickly became a fire that burned away everything except a single, clear purpose. The Council had made a terrible mistake. They had believed that killing innocent people would make humanity afraid. They had thought that brutality would teach humans to obey. They were wrong. Carter stood up slowly. He walked to his communication console and opened a channel to every military installation in human space. His voice was calm when he spoke, but there was steel beneath the words. This is Admiral Daniel Carter. As of this moment, humanity is at war with the Galactic Council. All military personnel are to report to their stations immediately. All reserve forces are activated. All civilian production facilities will begin conversion to war manufacturing within 48 hours. He paused for a moment, letting his next words form carefully in his mind. The Council believes we are weak. They believe we will bow down and accept this massacre. They believe they can do whatever they want to us because they have done it to others for millions of years. But they have never faced an enemy like humanity. They do not understand what we are capable of when we are pushed too far. Hardened into something that sounded like a promise and a threat combined into one. We will make them understand. The news of the massacre spread across human space like fire through dry wood. Every man, woman, and child learned what had happened in Kepler 442. They saw the images of burning cities. They heard the recordings of dying families. They felt the weight of 173,000 lost souls pressing down on their hearts. President Nathan Harris stood before the global assembly building on Earth. Cameras broadcast his image to every corner of human civilization. Behind him flew the flags of every nation that had joined the Human Federation. Symbols of a species that had learned to put aside old hatreds when survival demanded unity. Today, the Galactic Council has shown us exactly how they see humanity, Harris said. His face was pale, but his voice did not shake. They see us as insects to step on. They see us as children to punish when we do not obey their rules. Believe we will accept this massacre and learn our place. He let the silence stretch across billions of watching faces. They are wrong. In the weeks that followed, humanity changed in ways that no one had predicted. Factories that had been making consumer goods were converted to military production within days. Mining operations sent their entire output to shipyards instead of trading ports. Scientists who had been studying the mysteries of the universe now focused on building weapons that could kill the enemies who threatened their species. Captain Kevin Blake commanded the heavy cruiser Resolute, one of the newest warships in the human fleet. He was 38 years old, considered young for such an important command, but he had proven himself during fights with Mendari pirates along the outer borders of human space. His crew of 800 looked to him for leadership, and he refused to show them his own fears. The Council thinks this war will be quick, he told his officers during their first meeting. They have fought wars for millions of years, but every war they have fought has followed their rules. Their fleets move in patterns that have not changed since before humans existed. They have never faced an enemy who refuses to fight the way they expect. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Wells sat across from him at the conference table. She had transferred from the research division, bringing knowledge about alien biology and council military methods. The elder species fight slowly and carefully, she explained. They calculate losses before every battle. They follow traditions that are older than human civilization. They have never needed to change because they have always faced enemies who were either too weak to hurt them or too civilized to fight dirty. Blake smiled, though there was no warmth in it. Then we will teach them what fighting dirty really means. The first human attack came 6 weeks after the massacre. 43 warships jumped into the Talashe staging system without warning. The carrier Independence led the assault, its hull painted with the names of every colony that had been destroyed. The battle lasted 11 hours and changed everything. The galaxy knew about war. Human ships did not. Fight in neat lines like council fleets. They scattered across the battlefield, regrouped in unexpected places, and scattered again before enemy weapons could lock onto them. They hid behind asteroids and wreckage, using the debris of destroyed ships as shields. When their guns could not break through Talashe armor, they launched boarding parties instead. Marines empowered combat. Suits cut through enemy hulls and fought with knives and fists in corridors that had never been designed for such brutal combat. Admiral Elizabeth Porter commanded the operation from the bridge of the Independence. She was 54 years old and had spent her entire career preparing for a war she hoped would never happen. Now that war had come, she found herself drawing on instincts that seemed to come from deep inside human nature. These were the instincts of ancestors who had survived, not because they were the strongest, but because they were the most clever and the most stubborn. Concentrate all fire on their command ship, she ordered. Ignore everything else until that ship is dead. The Talashe commander was named Vector. He had led successful campaigns for 10,000 years. He had destroyed civilizations and conquered worlds without number. But he had never faced an enemy like this. Every time he ordered his fleet to retreat into defensive positions, the humans followed without hesitation. When he tried to call for help, he discovered that human stealth ships had been destroying his communication relays. The battle ended when human marines broke onto the bridge of Vector's flagship. They surrounded him with weapons raised and demanded his surrender. It was the first time in recorded galactic history that a Talashe commander had been captured alive. When the news reached Earth 2 days later, humanity celebrated for the first time since the massacre. People danced in the streets. They held each other and cried with relief. For a brief moment, the weight of grief lifted and hope took its place. But Admiral Carter knew the truth. This was only one victory. The Council had thousands of ships and millions of years of experience. They would not make the same mistakes again. The real war was just beginning. In the months that followed, humanity struck again and again. Small fleets hit supply lines and research stations. Special forces attacked fuel depots and communication centers. Every mission was designed to cause maximum damage, while risking minimum lives. Commander Samuel Hughes led many of these raids. His squadron of fast attack ships became famous throughout human space for their daring and their skill. At 29 years old, he was one of the youngest commanders in the fleet. He had joined the Navy, hoping to explore the wonders of the galaxy. Instead, he had become a warrior fighting for his species' survival. Lieutenant Amy Crawford served as his navigator. She was brilliant with numbers and coordinates, able to calculate jump paths that other navigators thought were impossible. Together, they had led dozens of successful missions, each one hurting the Council a little more. "We have confirmed the target location," Crawford reported during one mission briefing. "A Voroth facility that produces their shield technology. If we destroy it, we set back their defenses by decades." Hughes studied the tactical display. The facility was deep in enemy territory, surrounded by patrol fleets and defensive platforms. Getting in would be difficult. Getting out might be impossible. "How long before their patrols respond to our attack?" he asked. 12 minutes. "Maybe less if they have ships we have not detected." 12 minutes to destroy a facility that had been producing advanced technology for thousands of years. 12 minutes before overwhelming enemy forces arrived to kill them all. Hughes made his decision. "We go in, fast and hard. Hit everything we can and get out before they know what happened." The raid was a complete success. The facility burned behind them as they jumped to safety. Hughes brought every ship home without losing a single crew member. But not every mission ended so well. For every victory, there were failures. Ships disappeared into enemy space and never returned. Crews were captured and never seen again. Colonies that could not be defended were destroyed in retaliation for human attacks. The war continued. Both sides bled. And the galaxy watched in amazement as the young species that everyone had dismissed as primitive proved that they would rather die fighting than live as slaves. The Galactic Council gathered in emergency session on their capital world of Nexus Prime. Great Meeting Chamber was designed to hold thousands of representatives from hundreds of species, but today it felt empty and cold as the 12 elder species came together to discuss what many had started calling the human crisis. High Chancellor Cerithus of the Vorath led the assembly. Their body was made of living crystal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows across the chamber walls. Cerithos had ruled the council for 300 years. In all that time, they had never faced a problem quite like this one. The reports from our military commanders are troubling, Cerithos announced. Their voice was like music, translated by machines into words that other species could understand. The humans have achieved in weeks what most species take centuries to develop. Their fighting methods are chaotic and impossible to predict, and they are devastatingly effective. Ambassador Dreth of the Mendari shifted nervously in their seat. Their insect body clicked and buzzed in patterns that showed deep worry. We made a mistake. Our cultural experts told us that humans were primitive and violent and prone to destroying themselves. We believed these qualities would make them easy to control. Instead, said General Calthor of the Talishi military, these same qualities have made them dangerous enemies. They do not fear death like other species do. They do not calculate how many lives they can afford to lose before a battle. They simply fight until they cannot fight anymore. And then they find ways to keep fighting. The chamber fell silent. Every being there understood what this meant. For millions of years, the council had maintained order through overwhelming power. Species that disobeyed were destroyed. Species that submitted were allowed to survive. It was simple and effective and had worked without fail since before the oldest records, until now, far across the galaxy. Admiral Carter was holding meetings of his own, but his visitors were not council members. They were representatives from species that had never before dared to speak against the ruling powers. The Korvath arrived first. They were distant cousins of the Korvani, the species that the council had destroyed completely as a warning to others. For 10,000 years, the Korvath had lived in fear, obeying every council command, never daring to remember their murdered relatives. But the human victories had awakened something in them. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe just the courage that comes from seeing someone else stand up to a bully. The Visani came next. They were a peaceful species who had achieved space travel long ago, but had been denied council membership for reasons that were never explained. They offered intelligence about council fleet movements. Gathered over centuries of quiet observation, even some Mendari hive-worlds, tired of living under Talishi control, began passing information through secret channels. These were dangerous communications. If the council discovered them, entire populations would be executed. But the Mendari who helped did so anyway, because they had finally seen that resistance was possible. Dr. Christine Park coordinated all these delicate talks from a hidden station deep in the asteroid belt near Earth. She was 61 years old and had spent her whole life studying alien cultures. She had a gift for finding common ground between species that seemed to have nothing in common. The Council's power has always depended on one belief, she explained to Admiral Carter during a secure communication, the belief that they cannot be defeated. For millions of years, that belief has been true. But beliefs can become weaknesses. Carter studied the map of stars floating between them. You are saying we can build an alliance against them? I am saying the alliance already exists. It has existed for a very long time. She pointed to different star systems on the map. These species have been pushed down, ignored, and treated as inferior by the Council for longer than humanity has existed. They have been waiting for someone to prove that fighting back is possible. We have proven that. And if the Council decides to punish everyone who helps us, they have enough weapons to destroy dozens of worlds. Christine smiled sadly. Then we will have to keep them so busy fighting us that they do not have time to hurt anyone else. The human offensive continued without pause. Strike forces attacked Talishi supply ships, Vorath research centers, and Mendari colony vessels with equal fury. Every attack sent the same message. Nowhere in Council space was safe anymore. Commander Samuel Hughes led his squadron deeper into enemy territory with each new mission. His ships had become famous throughout both human and Council space. The Talishi called them ghost ships because they appeared from nowhere, struck with terrible force, and vanished before anyone could respond. Lieutenant Amy Crawford had grown thin from lack of sleep. But her skills had only sharpened. She could calculate jump coordinates that allowed their ships to appear inside enemy defense lines, strike their targets, and disappear before weapons could lock onto them. We are running low on missiles, she reported during one mission briefing. Our last resupply was 3 weeks ago. Hughes nodded grimly. The supply lines were stretched thin. Human factories were producing weapons as fast as they could, but the distances involved were enormous. Ships like his had to make every shot count. Then we get creative, he said. Find me targets that we can destroy with what we have. Fuel depots, communication relays. Anything that hurts them without wasting ammunition, we cannot replace. They found plenty of targets. The Council's infrastructure had grown comfortable over millions of years of peace. They had never needed to protect their supply lines because no enemy had ever reached them. Now human raiders appeared everywhere, burning and destroying and disappearing like smoke. But the cost was high. Hughes lost 2 ships during one raid, when a Council patrol arrived earlier than expected. He wrote letters to the families of every crew member who died, 27 letters in total. Each one felt like a knife in his heart. Commander Lisa Morgan, back on Earth, was dealing with costs of a different kind. She had been promoted to coordinate all defensive operations around the human home system. It was an enormous responsibility, and she felt its weight every moment of every day. Intelligence reports suggest the Council is planning something big, she told Admiral Carter during one of their regular meetings. They are pulling ships from patrol duties across their entire territory. We have never seen movements like this before. Carter had aged visibly since the war began. New lines marked his face, and his movements had grown slower. But his mind remained sharp, and his will remained iron. They are gathering their strength for a decisive blow, he said. They believe that if they can destroy Earth, the rest of humanity will surrender. Can we stop them? The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Not here. Not defending. We need to take the fight to them before they are ready. We need to end this war on our terms, not theirs. Morgan understood what he was not saying. The next battle would decide everything. Win or lose, there would be no going back. 8 months had passed since the first shots were fired. The war had reached a point that neither side had expected. Humanity controlled a growing area of space, protected by defensive stations and early warning systems that made direct attacks costly. The Council, despite having far more ships and resources, found themselves stuck in a fight that showed no signs of ending. Earth itself had become a fortress unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. More than 500 weapons platforms now circled humanity's homeworld, each one capable of destroying targets across the entire solar system. The moon had been hollowed out and turned into a military command center, its surface covered with sensors and missile launchers. Mars, once a struggling colony where people lived in cramped domes, now served as the main shipyard for humanity's growing fleet. Admiral Daniel Carter carried the weight of the war on his shoulders. The stress had left him looking years older than he was. Deep lines marked his face, and his back seemed permanently bent with tension. But his mind had lost none of its sharpness, and his determination had only grown stronger with each passing month. The Council is preparing something, he told his command staff during their weekly strategy meeting. Our spies report they are gathering a fleet larger than anything we have seen. Over 3,000 warships, including their biggest capital ships. Commander Lisa Morgan studied the projections on the tactical display. Her face went pale as she absorbed the numbers. If that fleet reaches Earth, we cannot stop it. We can hurt them badly, but we cannot defeat a force that size, which is why we are not going to let them reach Earth. Carter activated a holographic map showing the empty space between human territory and Council territory. It was a dead zone with no planets worth living on and no resources worth fighting over. Just empty darkness stretching across light years. We will meet them here in the void expanse. We will fight them in open space, far from any world that could be caught in the crossfire. Captain Kevin Blake had earned his admiral's rank through months of successful combat. Now he commanded a task force of 20 ships, and his voice carried authority when he spoke. You want to fight them without any defensive advantages? Just our ships against theirs in open space? I want to end this war. Carter's voice was heavy with exhaustion and determination. The Council has been holding back. They have been sending just enough ships to contain us while they wait for us to run out of strength. They believe time is on their side. They think we will eventually break. He pointed at the map. This battle will prove them wrong. We will bring everything we have. We will make them believe they have finally trapped us. And then we will show them exactly what humanity can do when our survival is at stake. The preparations took weeks. Ships from every human colony gathered at the meeting point. 312 warships in total, from massive carriers that could launch hundreds of fighters to small gunboats that could barely hold 10 crew members. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Lieutenant Michelle Davis served aboard the destroyer Relentless, assigned to the forward screening force. At 26, she was one of the youngest officers in the entire fleet. Her specialty was electronic warfare, using signals and codes to confuse enemy sensors. She had developed several techniques that had saved countless lives during previous battles. Her captain was Commander Gregory Adams, a weathered veteran of 53 years who had been fighting since before Michelle was born. He showed no reaction when the Council fleet arrived. The enemy fleet has jumped into the system, Michelle reported from her station. Sensors are counting approximately 3,200 contacts. Adams did not blink. Signal the fleet. All ships to battle formation Delta. The human ships began to move, ranging themselves into positions that Admiral Carter and his planners had spent weeks perfecting. The formation looked desperate, like a trapped animal preparing to fight to the death. That was exactly how it was supposed to look. Hi, Chancellor Sarathos. Watched the human deployment from the bridge of their massive command ship. The crystalline beings studied the small human fleet facing the overwhelming might of the Council. To Sarathos, the outcome seemed certain. They have courage, Sarathos observed. I will acknowledge that. But courage without strength is merely a slower form of dying. General Calthor of the Talashi stood nearby, his reptilian eyes fixed on the tactical display. Should we offer them the chance to surrender? No, the time for offers is past. Today we end the human threat permanently. Today, we remind the galaxy what happens to species that defy the Council. The Council fleet advanced in perfect formation, thousands of ships moving as one. Their commanders felt confident. They had numbers, experience, and technology on their side. They expected the humans to fight hard, to make them pay for every meter of space. But none of them doubted how this battle would end. Commander Samuel Hughes stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the enemy approach. His squadron had been assigned to a special mission, one that Admiral Carter had explained to only a handful of officers. They were not going to fight with the main fleet. They had a different job. Jump drives are ready, reported Lieutenant Amy Crawford. Coordinates are locked. Hughes took a deep breath. The mission they had been given was almost certainly one way. The chances of survival were small, but if they succeeded, they could change everything. All hands, this is the commander, he said over the ship's communication system. You all know what we are about to do. You all know the risks. I will not pretend that today is going to be easy, but I want you to know that I am proud to serve with every one of you. Whatever happens in the next few hours, know that what we do here matters. We fight for everyone back home who is counting on us. He paused. Feeling the weight of the moment, we fight for humanity. The main battle began when the Council fleet crossed the boundary that Admiral Carter had designated. Every human ship opened fire at once, filling space with a storm of weapons fire T. Hat turned the darkness into blinding light. But the real attack came from a different direction entirely. The Battle of the Void Expanse began at 3:47 in the morning. Time. The Council fleet crossed Admiral Carter's engagement line, and every human ship opened fire at the same moment. The darkness of space exploded into brilliant light as thousands of weapons found their targets, but the initial attack was only meant to distract the enemy hidden. Among the human fleet were 47 ships. That had been changed beyond anything the Council had ever seen. Their weapons and armor had been stripped away and replaced with experimental engines that Dr. Christine Park's research teams had built in secret. These ships were not designed to fight in the traditional sense. They were designed to jump directly into the heart of the enemy fleet, while the Council focused on the battle in front of them. These modified ships activated their special drives and vanished from normal space. They reappeared moments later, not facing the enemy, but behind them, right in the middle of the Council's command ships. Hi. Chancellor Cerethos barely had time to understand what was happening before alarms started screaming across their bridge. Human Marines were cutting through the hull of their ship. Commander Samuel Hughes led the assault team himself. His powered armor was scratched and dented from fights he had barely survived. He had volunteered for this mission, knowing he would probably die. But the target was too important to trust to anyone else. Move fast and stay close, he ordered his Marines as they cut through corridor after corridor. We need to reach the bridge before their guards can organize.
Ow!
The Vorath security forces fought back with desperate fury. They were elite soldiers, trained over centuries to protect the High Chancellor. But they had never trained to fight enemies who showed no fear, kept coming no matter how many fell. Hughes lost 11 Marines reaching the bridge. Each death was a weight he would carry forever if he survived. But he did not stop. He could not stop. They burst onto the bridge and found Cerethos standing among the bodies of fallen guards. The crystalline being looked at Hughes with something that might have been respect or might have been hatred. You cannot win, Cerethos said through their translator. Even if you capture me, the Council will never surrender. You have only delayed what is coming. Hughes removed his helmet. His face was covered with sweat and blood, some of it his own. Maybe you are right. But right now, you are going to order your fleet to stop fighting. And if I refuse, then we will kill you, find whoever takes your place, and give them the same choice. Hughes pointed toward the viewport where the battle still raged. Your ships are dying out there. Every minute you wait, more lives are lost on both sides. Is your pride worth that many deaths? The moment stretched on forever. Outside, the human fleet pressed its attack with everything it had. Council ships that had fought together for millions of years could not coordinate their defense because their chain of command had been shattered. The perfect formations they had trained for so long dissolved into chaos. Admiral Elizabeth Porter commanded the human assault from the Independence. She watched the tactical display as Council ships began to fall back in confusion. They were winning, but the cost was terrible. Human ships were dying alongside enemy vessels, their crews sacrificing themselves to buy time for Hughes and his Marines. Push forward, she ordered. Do not let them recover. Keep the pressure on. Captain Kevin Blake led his task force directly into the heart of the enemy formation. His ships took heavy damage, but they kept fighting. Around him, he watched friends die. He watched ships he had served with explode into burning wreckage. But he did not stop. On the bridge of the Council flagship, Cerethos finally spoke.
Ow.
Council vessels, stop firing. Repeat, stop firing and wait for further orders. The guns fell silent across the battlefield. Ships that had been trying to destroy each other moments ago broke apart and drifted among the wreckage of thousands of destroyed vessels. The human fleet, battered and bleeding but unbroken, held its position. Admiral Carter's voice echoed across all communication channels, reaching every ship on both sides. This war is over. The Galactic Council will negotiate fairly, or we will continue fighting until there is no council left to negotiate with. The treaty took 6 months to write. Human negotiators, led by Dr. Christine Park, demanded full membership in the Galactic Council with equal voting rights. They demanded the same status for every species that had helped them during the war. They demanded payment for the massacre at Kepler 442. Though everyone knew no amount of money could bring back the dead. Most importantly, they demanded that the Council's absolute power be broken forever. A new set of rules was written that protected the rights of all member species, no matter how long they had been traveling among the stars. The age of elder species ruling over everyone else had ended. Admiral Daniel Carter retired 1 year after the war ended. He spent his final years in a small house overlooking the ocean on Earth. Sometimes he dreamed of the battles, of friends he had lost and decisions that haunted him. But more often, he dreamed of the future that his species had won through blood and sacrifice. Captain Kevin Blake became Admiral Blake, commanding the new combined fleet that patrolled the borders of known space. His crew now included members from a dozen different species, all working together in ways that would have seemed impossible just a few years before. Commander Lisa Morgan took over Earth's defense forces, making sure that humanity would never again be caught unprepared. She trained a new generation of officers who understood that peace had to be defended, not just wished for. Dr. Christine Park received the highest honor the galaxy could give, the first human ever to be recognized that way. She spent her remaining years teaching others that understanding between species was not just possible, but necessary for survival. Commander Samuel Hughes survived the battle, though just barely. He retired from combat and became a teacher at the military academy, passing on what he had learned to young officers who had never known war. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. Humans were not the primitive, violent creatures the Council had dismissed. They were survivors who had been shaped by millions of years of evolution to overcome any challenge, any enemy, any obstacle in their path. When pushed, they pushed back harder. When threatened, they fought without hesitation. When told they could not win, they found a way to win anyway. And when the universe tried to break them, they proved that some things simply cannot be broken. They were humanity, and they had finally taken their rightful place among the stars.